Hey, I want to talk a bit about nuisance calls. Now, I'm sure most people watching this video can relate to that on some level. By nuisance calls, I'm not talking about prank calls, I'm not talking about kids sort of trying to wind people up. I'm talking about companies calling up to have surveys or try to sell you something. Um, Basically, the context of this is I got yet another one earlier today, and I actually recognise the guy's voice. He has phoned, I think he's an Indian guy, just by the accent. He has phoned about 10 times, and each time I've said something different, like, Mr. Hayes that is not available, or please stop calling this number, or today it was he's not around. It was about myself, but I think the guy knew full well. Now, what frustrates me is I've already made it clear to them to stop phoning this number, and I know my mother has as well, and it's very frustrating. I have been a charity fundraiser, and I almost applied to work in a call centre, so I understand the score. These people are just doing their job, and they have to sort of meet targets and so on. But I think the whole premise of it is very, very flawed. It's a little bit like if you have advertisements on YouTube videos. 99% of people try their best to skip over the advertisement and they get nothing from it. So that sort of advertising, to me, it's counterproductive. It doesn't sell the product, it just annoys people. And I'm not saying I'm against advertising. I can understand. And, you know, a good ad is memorable, and it can be, some ads are really good, but mostly when it comes to advertising and cold calling, it's very frustrating. Most people just find it a nuisance. I'm not saying it's a great hardship in life, but it is, I think, disrespectful if you're telling someone that please stop calling this number and they persistently do it. Now, if that's the same guy, he should be writing down this number and never calling again, and ensuring that his colleagues don't. So next time I think I'm going to just give off to him, and because I've been polite for long enough. Like I say, these people need to meet targets, but it comes down to the company itself. I really think that companies that persistently harass people through cold calls should be fined, or should have some sort of answering to do to consumer watchdogs, or to basically, I just think it shouldn't. I think it should be illegal. Cold calling. I don't agree with the concept at all. Now, I understand companies need to sell their business. That's why I'm saying I'm not against advertising. But if people really want a certain service, they're going to look for it. The majority of people don't respond well to cold calls. Occasionally you might get someone who buys into something, but then quite often these people are very shady anyway, and they get people into contracts and then get them into situations where they are in debt and stuff, and it's very... Personally, I would never agree to buy anything over the phone like that. So personally, I'm very skeptical of cold calling, and I think most people, from what I gather, have a very dim view of it. So I don't know what these companies think that they're actually doing. I mean, it takes a lot of their manpower and time. I don't see what they're gaining from it, because all it does is piss the general public off. It is an invasion of privacy, and it's just... I just don't see the purpose of it. So I really think that they need to analyse how effective this is. I'm afraid the next person who phones up I'm going to give off, and it might well be another person who hasn't spoken to me before, but I'm getting so fed up of these calls. Now, one or two, okay, I can let it go, but when you get like 10 calls, and you know it's the same person, it's like, I think next time he calls I'm going to, let's say, use rather colourful language, and say, make it clear. And the thing is, some of them are right. I'm sympathetic to those who need to meet targets, because I understand they have a job to do, but some of them are darn right rude, and they patronise you. They say, oh, but you really do want this, or... I'm not talking necessarily about selling products. Or there are some exceptions to this rule, by the way. I make the exception for political things, because, you know, a very common complaint in Britain is, oh, politicians never listen. So I think there are certain circumstances for doing certain surveys that people should be open-minded and think, okay, they need to gauge back some opinions for marketing purposes, to you know, how can politicians be expected to change anything if they don't know exactly what it is that people want changed? I think that's unreasonable. So in a political context, like say for example leading up to a general election, you get cold calls saying, what do you think on this issue, on this issue, on this issue? I don't have a problem with that, because I think that politicians do need to gauge, and civil servants within the political network need some way of gauging public opinion. So I don't agree with people who say there should be no sort of questions whatsoever, but I just think there's certain, you know, when it's persistent and when people make it clear they don't want to be bothered, that's when it becomes a problem. And half the time it is for things that have no connection to me. I mean, I'm not a homeowner. I haven't worked in a factory that has noise, and yet I still persistently get these calls. Now I tell them the answer, and I try to be patient. But then it's annoying when you get the same call again, even after you've said that please don't call this number again. Like I said, I try to be polite because I don't, you know, I know some people just yell initially on the first call. I don't exactly agree with that, because the people doing it, in most cases they are just doing their job. But what's the problem is when you have told them to stop calling and they persistently do it. So the next time I get a call like that, I'm afraid I'm not going to hold back. But this is just a rant basically. It's not really any purpose to this video other than expressing something that a lot of people already know. The same thing applies to advertising. Now YouTube ads, because it's a free website, that's probably how it pays for its upkeep. It's how it is sustainable. It probably you know, has deals with advertisers. But for the advertisers themselves, it's and I suppose, you know, obviously I'm not going to complain about a free service, so I guess we have to bear that in mind. But from the advertiser's point of view, I don't think they're going to sell anything, because 99% of people will not watch the ad and just wait until they can skip it. Very occasionally they might watch it. Okay, I guess as I'm making this, I'm just thinking, well, okay, they need to, YouTube is a free website, they need to pay for it. But all in all, I think there needs to be an analysis from the CEOs of these companies as to if their approach is really working, because I'm very skeptical that it is. Cold calling, the average person does not like, so it's counterproductive in that sense. Like I said, I understand companies and politicians need to gauge opinion, and you know, what other ways can they do that? Maybe they could say questionnaires for the post, but most people just put it in the recycling bin. So on one hand, it's a bit unfair to expect politicians to sort of say, oh, they never listen, but you know, unless they go and knock people's doors, which not everyone likes, then how can you expect them to really gauge public opinion? I think that's unfair. So I'm trying to be objective in this. I understand companies, politicians and so on need to gauge opinion, but I just think they need to examine other ways to do it, or at least if they're going to do it, if someone's made it clear that they don't want to be continuously harassed, then stop. Let me know your thoughts on this. Do you get frequent cold calls? How do you deal with it? Do you tell them to stop calling them number? In your country, is that a big problem? I'm speaking in the context of the UK. Let me know what country you're calling from, or you're replying from. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think it's necessary? Do you think it's unnecessary? What do you think? Cheers.